People, I don't think, Professor, realize how devastating inflation is, especially if you're on a fixed income.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And the Federal Reserve's policy of maintaining very low interest rates is another way that those folks are being hurt. Inflation, as Milton Friedman used to say, is the cruelest tax because it takes revenue by government creating money. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're being hurt this way.
Mm-hmm. Professor, you've written extensively about housing. This morning I was on Fox and Friends, and I was talking about the head of the teachers union here in Los Angeles, who says the effort for in-school learning is being driven by systemic racism, by white, wealthy districts that will be far less susceptible to COVID-19. And I'm looking at all these black parents, Professor, who are urging the schools to reopen. Many of these parents are single parents. They can't be home to make sure the kids are doing online learning, and guess what? They're not. The reason I mention that is because you've written extensively about housing and how the housing prices in California are 50% higher than they otherwise would be if it weren't for all these ridiculous regulations. And this hurts low-income people like the black people that the politicians claim that they care about.
Oh, that's absolutely right. The fact that schools are not open is really, really hurting black kids, Hispanic kids. They don't have as much access to computers or tutors. They're the ones who are really, really being hurt by this. And it's very ironic that teachers' unions are talking about white supremacy and racism when their refusal to try to negotiate and get kids back into schools are really harming the kids that they are saying that they're trying to help.
Mm-hmm. Professor, I've talked about think tanks on the left and the right. Brookings is on the left. There's one called the American Enterprise Institution on the right. And they pretty much say the same thing as to what one has to do to escape poverty. And the first step is to finish high school. And here we have in California, as you know, 85% of black kids cannot read at state levels of proficiency. 80% of Hispanic kids cannot. And the math scores are even worse. And they're monkeying around with critical ethnic studies and ethno-mathematics, as you write about. You know, Scotty, beam me up.
Yeah, there's a group of school administrators and teachers who are blaming the test scores of black kids and Hispanic kids, which are only about 10 to 15% at proficiency or above levels, compared to Asian kids who are almost two-thirds proficient or above. And the test scores of the black kids and the Hispanic kids are being blamed on things such as white supremacy that sneaks its way into the classroom, and capitalism, imperialism, and racism. And they want to change the way math is being taught. The idea of ethnomathematics is that math is not objective, it's subjective. There's not one right answer. And in the article that you cite, I go on to say that, well, you know, let's hope that the engineers of tomorrow, the ones who build bridges and tunnels and highways, let's hope they get the right answer, because we don't want those bridges falling down and we don't want those tunnels collapsing. The idea that minority kids don't have the ability to learn the same type of math as Asian kids and white kids is, I think, just the cruelest insult to those children. They're often in schools with teachers who are overwhelmed or who don't have enough background in mathematics to be effective teachers. We should be taking that budget and helping teachers learn how to appreciate and understand mathematics so they can be more effective teachers. That's the way we get these kids to become proficient and give them an opportunity to compete for high-paying jobs in STEM-type occupations. But right now we're doing just an enormous disservice to these kids, and the idea that they're not able to learn traditional mathematics, the kind of math that's being taught in China, where kids are achieving success at levels way, way outside of what we're doing in the U.S., that's what we need to be copying, those best practices, not pretending that kids can't learn traditional mathematics.
I'm talking to Professor Lee Ohanian of UCLA. His article is called The Capitalists Who Sell Ethnic Studies. It's up on LarryElder.com. One of the ironies you point out, Professor, in your article is that they're attacking capitalism, but there's a 2-hour online webinar at $350 per participant that some capitalist is selling to the school district about all this ethnic studies, and there's no real right or wrong answer. But somebody who is a capitalist is making money off of all of this.
No, that's absolutely right. The San Mateo School District has hired an educational consultant who, with his 2-hour webinar that, as you mentioned, costs $350 per participant, they get a toolkit from the $350 to help teachers on their, quote, journey to become anti-racist, end quote, and to eliminate white supremacy and racism from the classroom, and to eliminate how capitalism influences mathematics teaching. And yet they're the ones who are making just boatloads of money off of this enterprise. So it's I wish people could see through this.
Professor, can you stick around just for a few more minutes? I want to ask you about, you were talking about the students in Shanghai, China, often placing first in math assessments, and the fact that the United Kingdom has brought 60 of these math instructors over from Shanghai to teach. Professor, please don't go away. And I want to talk to you about Bitcoin and about gold, and whether or not, given the inflation that you and I are talking about, people ought to be looking at either of those. Professor Lee Ohanian, Larry Elder, don't leave town.